Back to Varanasi on foot from Allahabad, Abhedananda, after staying here for a few days in the company of Swami Sharadananda and Dinu Maharaj, returned to Baranagar with the object of taking rest for some time before starting for fresh pilgrimage. Among the inhabitants of the Muth, he found only Niranjan, Shashi, and Tarak, who were then carrying on the daily worship of the Master. He wrote, "It was arranged that a portion at least of the group should always remain at Baranagar, while the other brethren follow the call of the forest. It may be pointed out here that while almost all the disciples went sometimes or other to pilgrimage, there was only one who never quitted the place. He was Shasi, the faithful guardian of the Muth." The journey from Varanasi to Varanagar was done by foot as usual, and it was only at Bali that Abhedananda requested a boatman to take him on the other side of the Ganges, free of charge. As he wrote, "The first to receive me at the Muth was Shashi, who embraced me, as he found me there all on a sudden. Tears rolled down in our eyes, and none of us could utter a word at that moment. After a while, Shashi asked me, 'Where had you been so long, brother?' 'On pilgrimage.' 'But I am having my days in the worship of the Master.' 'Shashi, you are the most fortunate among us. The Master has showered his mercy on you. Really, you are the faithful guardian of the Muth.'" Swami Nirajananda and Swami Shivananda were also pleased to find him after a long time, and as they had all gathered together, they were at once carried to those happy days in the past, days that were spent in the association with the Master. The past was thus almost recreated as they fell into the discussion of those days at Dakshineswar, Shayamkupur, and lastly at Kasapur. Thus, reminding over the past memories, they felt inwardly so happy that it is not possible to describe it adequately in words. The conditions in the monastery at Brahmakar were, however, not at all prosperous. The daily worship of the Master was carried on somehow, while the brother monks had their meals once a day out of what was provided by the householder devotees. In any ways, Abhedananda spent his days happily at Baranagar, as usual, in study and meditation. But his stay here could not be prolonged for reasons which need not be discussed here, which are none too pleasant to refer. According to his own statement, he had to leave the Muth with a heavy heart and also with a determination not to come back. Those were the months of July and August, and the weather was inclement as could be imagined. It was raining heavily, with the monsoon accompanied with thunder, when Abhedananda left the Muth and walked all the way up to Gaya, where he had his oblation in the river Falgu, and where he also visited the holy shrine of Vishnu and the footprints of the Lord inside the temple. He then left Gaya for Varanasi and thence to Allahabad, where he did not like to stay. This state of solitary flight was unusual. Walking alone and penniless on the road and walking continuously, he first reached Agra and then proceeded to Delhi, the city of historical memories. As he wrote, "The crisp air and the grandeur of the place, its memories, its history, and its atmosphere filled him with physical and spiritual elation." After spending a couple of days here, Abhedananda visited one by Jaipur and Abu and a few other places. While he was touring in these regions, he felt an irresistible desire to meet his spiritual brother, Naren, who was also then traveling in those places under the name of Sachit Ananda. The Swami was then staying at Junagadh as the guest of the Diwan of that state. As Swami Abhedananda writes, "I crossed the river Narmada and reached Junagadh. On my way to that place, I halted at Porbandar, where I was the guest of Shankar Pandaram, and it was from him that I gathered about one English-speaking Bengali sannyasin, Sachit Ananda by name, who had been to Porbandar a few days earlier. I did not recognize who this Satchidananda was, but later on I learned that it was under this assumed name that Naren was traveling in Gujarat and Kutch. But the description of the sannyasin he had from Shankar Pandurang had convinced him that he must be no other person than his beloved Guru Bhai, Naren, and so he became all the more eager to meet him. He thought that he might meet him at Porbandar, and thus he stayed for 3 days there. According to Swami Abhedananda's record, he found in his host a great Sanskrit scholar. Shankara Pandurang was then engaged in compiling and printing the Atharva Veda. He was so much impressed with the visiting monk, as he discussed with him about Hindu scriptures, that the reputed scholar requested him to remain as his guest for a few more days. But as he was then eager to meet Naren, Abhedananda left Porbandar and set out for Junagadh. And on arriving there, he came to know that one Bengali sannyasin, known as Sachit Ananda, was staying at the house of Gujarat Brahmin Mansukram Tripathi, who was the private secretary of the Nawab. The biographers of Swami Vivekananda have not mentioned this incident, and Abhedananda met him at Junagadh. Because of the Mount Gurnar a few miles from the city, Junagadh is not only a place of historic interest, but a place of pilgrimage as well. For here are many temples sacred to Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists. There are also many beautiful mosques and tombs. Of the Hindu ruins, the caves of Kaprakodia, used at various times as monasteries by monks of different orders, were the most interesting. Swami Vivekananda was in his sadhana in the cave at Kaprakodi. Now let us see what happened when both the brother monks met, as has been very nicely told by Swami Abhedananda himself, and the following passage reproduced here from his autobiography, which he narrated, will impress the reader. On arriving at Junagadh, as I learnt of the Bengali sannyasin, who also spoke English, and who was staying at the house of the Suryam Tripathi, a Gujarati Brahmin, and the private secretary of the Nawab, I inferred that the sannyasin in the guise of Satchidananda must be none other than Naren. And my inference proved correct when I found him at the place of the private secretary. He became simply overjoyed when he saw me before him unexpectedly. And so for me, I too could not control my emotion, and tears rolled down my cheeks to see my beloved Guru Bhai after a long time. Fortunately, as I reached the residence of Tripathi, I found Naren engaged with the host in the discourse of a topic related to Advaita Vedanta. Tripathi was an erudite scholar, well versed in Hindu scriptures. I once introduced him to Naren, and Tripathi rose and received me with a salutation and requested me to take my seat. As I sat, Naren looked at me and said to Tripathi, "He is also an Advaita Vedantist and my spiritual brother. Now he will have discourses with you." I was simply taken aback at this. I was then dead tired due to fatigue on my account of continuous walking. And moreover, on finding Naren after long days, my mind then swelled with emotion. And when I was just thinking to have some intimate talk with him, Naren called me to enter into discussion with his host. However, I had to obey my elder and began the discourse in Sanskrit with Tripathi on some aspects of Advaita Vedanta. It was in the nature of questions and answers, and I satisfied him with my answers on each and every point raised by him. As I talked to him, I watched the face of my Guru Bhai, who was also beaming with satisfaction. The Pandit too became very happy and bowed to me. Thus, the success of his brother monk left an impression on the mind of the leader, and once again this incident is that faraway place reminds us, and convincingly too, that the new communion of apostles, which was founded at Anpur, was now about to fulfill its historical mission. The discussion being over, Abhedananda apprised Naren of all the happenings at the Brahnagar Muth, which had compelled him to leave the monastery forever. He said, when he came to know all about the happenings at the Brahnagar Muth, Naren heaved a deep sigh and looked at me, saying in a steadfast tone, "You are a son of Sri Ramakrishna, and the Muth is composed of you all. Unless you go there, the Muth loses all its meaning." I could not check myself, and tears rolled down my cheeks as I heard him speaking to me in this manner. Not only that, he drew me near affectionately and consoled me with soft words which I would never forget. I had to yield myself to this affectionate gesture of the leader, and changing my mind, I assured him that I would return to the Muth again. As I thus said, I noticed that burden was lifted out of his mind. But as a leader, Vivekananda had also cherished welfare of his wandering brother monks in his heart. He knew that Kali Tapasi, true to his name, had been traveling all the way barefooted, and he considered it very risky. So we find him at Junagadh, requested by his brother monk not to travel further in this way. As he looked at the bare foot of Abhedananda, he cautioned him, saying, "You should not travel in this fashion, and if you disregard my request, you will have to suffer in the long run." Later, Swami Abhedananda wrote, "It is needless to say that this prediction of the Mahapurusha came to be true after a year and a half. I really suffered from an attack of footsores when I returned to Alabazar Muth after the completion of my pilgrimage." From Junagadh, Abhedananda set out for Dwarka. "As I bade him farewell," he wrote, "I found tears in the eyes of Naren, which reminded me of those happy days at Kosapur in the company of the Master. I too could not check my tears." This reminiscence of Abhedananda once again brings to our mind those memorable words of Swami Vivekananda, who said, "No, we are not dry monks." This simple utterance of that world conqueror is enough to show us the mettle of which he and his brother monks were built. History has also proved beyond all doubt and petty intellectual jargon that the new brotherhood of monks, which was founded on the soil of Bengal and which was sanctified with the ashes of Sri Ramakrishna, was destined to set a new example in the spiritual tradition of India. Another characteristic that marked the life of Swami Abhedananda was the ascetic was his personality, which endeared him to everyone. Wherever he went, he left the impression of an erudite monk, possessing a fine talent for debating and discourse on spiritual matters. And thus the religious-minded people everywhere he set his foot on would be attracted to him. A serene halo of renunciation marked his stately bearing in such a remarkable degree that might consider it a rare privilege to be acquainted with this solitary monk roaming on the roads of India. A man of few words and of reserved nature, Abhedananda strode like a mighty spiritual personality, and it was somewhat difficult for any layman or monk to become intimate with him unless his metals were sound. Persons of shallow and superficial attainments could hardly get access to this learned sannyasin. Princes and pandits alike regarded this wandering monk with utmost reverence. As a true son of Sri Ramakrishna, he fulfilled his 10 years of wandering life with such austerity it staggers our imagination. On arriving at Dwarka, Swami Abhedananda visited the ancient temple of Dwarkaji, where he spent a night. The place appeared to him holy with innumerable memories and legends of Sri Krishna. The next morning, he proceeded to Prabhash, one of the most holy places on the shores of the sea. Here he halted for a day and decided his next course of journey to Bombay. But how to cross the sea? He later wrote, "As I was thinking about the difficulty of crossing the sea, there suddenly appeared before me a Gujarati gentleman who seemed to me to belong to the merchant class. He came to me and after salutation asked me in Hindi about my destination. When he came to know that I intended to proceed to Bombay, the gentleman offered me some money to purchase a ticket. But I never touch coins. I would be thankful to you if you can provide me with a ticket on the lower deck in the steamer. He consented to it and brought a ticket to me. As he put the ticket on my hand and bowed to me, I felt once again the living presence of the Master. In fact, at every stop of his long and hazardous pilgrimage, Swami Abhedananda remembered Sri Ramakrishna with a mind that was full to the brim with utter devotion to him. This is why in his latter days he used to urge his disciples to have complete faith in the Guru, without which spiritual life is meaningless. He himself set an ideal example of it for his disciples to emulate. A man of stern renunciation, Abhedananda also set a new example as a wandering ascetic, and in this regard he can be compared to Swami Vivekananda, who was equally a man of stern renunciation. He reached Bombay on board the steamer, and he enjoyed the short steamer journey to his heart's content. After going round the city, he went to Mahabaleshwar, where he met Swami Vivekananda for a second time at the house of one Narottam Muraji Gulkaras, who was reputed to be a hospitable man. It was only a day that Swamiji had arrived there. As he later wrote, I was also cordially received by the Gokul Dasji, who showed me utmost respect as a spiritual brother of Swami Vivekananda. Here, Naren told me jokingly, Brother, why do you follow me in this way? Both of us have started our pilgrimage with the name of the Master. It is better that we travel quite independently of each other. To this I replied, You are wrong. Why shall I follow you? I am moving from one place to another just as you are doing, and it is not a chance, but the decree of the Master that we meet in this way. Certainly, he burst into loud laughter at this. I then told him that it was my intention to proceed south via Pune, and then to Nasik and other places. And he said, You better go to the north, and there will be no further chance of our meeting again. And on hearing this, Naren again burst into loud laughter. Incidentally, it should be mentioned here that it was at Bombay that Vivekananda said to his brother disciples, Kali, so much energy has accumulated in me that I am afraid that I may burst. This bursting occurred in less than a year at Chicago. Again, he set out on his solitary journey, and as he crossed one after another of such places at Pune and Nasik, the wandering monk was once again in his element. At last he reached Dandakarana, which was full of dense forest. As he touched the soil, his mind at once went thousands and thousand years back to that age known as the Treta Yuga, when India witnessed the advent of Sri Ramachandra, the God incarnate. While remembering about Sri Ramachandra, Abhedananda wrote, I also recall to my mind a day in the past when the Master, lying on his sick bed with Naren standing alone by his side, had said to him distinctly, He who was Rama and Krishna is now Ramakrishna in this body, but not from the standpoint of your Vedanta. This incident happened just a couple of days before the final illumination of the Master, and by these words did he not indicate to his disciples and also the whole world that Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna really combined in him the two incarnations of Sri Ramachandra in the Treta Yuga and Sri Krishna in the Dwapara Yuga. Strange is the play of the Lord. Only the fortunate can perceive it and witness it. It was due to the virtue acquired in our previous births that we were fortunate in witnessing the human incarnations of the Lord in Sri Ramakrishna. These reflections in the mind of our subject are worth pondering. While Naren was somewhat slow and skeptic in accepting the saint of Dakshineswar as God incarnate, it was just the reverse with Kali Prasad, who had accepted him fully as God incarnate on the very first day he was privileged to touch his feet. To understand this crest and glory of Swami Abhedananda's spiritual realization, one must study his life deeply and also drink deeply from the fountains of his teachings and utterances, when there emerged the world teachers out of the shell of the wandering monk. In the final phase of his pilgrimage, we find Swami Abhedananda touring over the holy places in South India, which presented before him a panorama of architectural grandeur, which left its mark on the memory of the wandering monk. The Swami, clad in garua, princely as he looked, easily attracted the attention of a number of eminent persons who found in this young sannyasin a born knower of religion and a remarkable spiritual personality they had ever known. As he set his foot on the soil of South India, the historical sense of the monk became at once aroused in him, and he began to observe each and every temple here with the eyes of a historian rather than with those of a monk. As he later wrote, I was simply fascinated with the sculptures of the temples of South India, which escaped the Muslim vandalism. None of the temples or idols inside them has been destroyed or disfigured here. The vast courtyards and the gopurams which characterize the temples in this part of India have added a beauty to them which cannot be adequately described in words. As he passed from one place to another, he saw, as it were, the ancient India with its hoary culture, civilization, and spirituality. And for some time, the glories of the past filled his mind to the exclusion of every other thought. How to recreate that past? Did the mind of the solitary monk cry out in this way? We can only conjecture that memorable moment of mental illumination in the life of the wandering monk as he went from place to place in the south. From the accounts of his itinerary as given by Swamiji himself in his autobiography, we learn that he first went to Rameshwaram, covering the whole track mostly on foot and partly by rail. On the way, he had his oblation in such holy rivers as the Tapti, Godavari, the Krishna, and the Kavari, very names of which sound spirituality. As every religious-minded man or woman in India knows, Rameshwaram is the Varanasi of southern India. It is the holiest of holy places, immortalized in the Ramayana, in the journey of Rama to Lanka, Sri Lanka, or the former Ceylon, in search of his abducted consort, Sita. The great temple at Rameshwaram has its gate 100 feet in height. The glory of the temple is its great corridors and open galleries. It is said that Sri Ramachandra, on his return from Lanka, after having defeated and slain Ravana, founded the temple and worshipped Shiva there. Abhedananda, the wandering ascetic, was happy to have accomplished one of the most cherished purposes of his 10 years wandering life. As he wrote, gradually I reached my destination, Rameshwaram, just at the confluence of 3 seas, and this added a grandeur to this holy place. I had my bath at the spot of the confluence, and then I went inside the temple to worship the idol of Shiva. The vast Snata Mandura of the temple stands on 1,000 pillars, which are skillfully carved. In the mellow light of the lamp, the deity, decorated in various sorts of jewels, looked splendid. It presented a sight which eyes can never forget. The very atmosphere breathed spirituality. I stayed at Rameshwaram 3 days, and on my return journey on the 4th day, I visited the temple of Meenakshi Devi at Madurai. This is the biggest temple in the whole of southern India, and it excels other shrines insofar as architectural beauty is concerned. From Madurai, I proceeded towards Trichinopoly, walking all the way on foot as usual. I collected my food by begging as I walked on. I found people in this part of India highly respectful to sadhus and sannyasins. On my arrival there, I went to visit the famous temple of Sri Rangam, where I worshiped to my heart's content the holy idol of Sri Ramgan. The other places he visited in the south included Tanjore, Kumbakonam, and Kanchi. At Kumbakonam, he was delighted to meet a South Indian sadhu who had not spoken for 30 years and who appeared to him to be a man of strict renunciation and discriminating mind. The beautiful temple of Kanchi equally fascinated him as its golden peak dazzled in the sunshine. He wrote of it, "The innumerable pillars made of black stone that adorn the wide Natamandura of the temple impressed me very much. But what struck me most was the chorus chanting in soulful tunes of the Vedic hymns of the Dravidian Pandits at one corner of the temple. I was also delighted to see the idol of Nataraja. I also noticed innumerable carvings of various gods and goddesses in and around the temple. As one looks at these fine carvings, they are reminded of the ancient times when the beauty and glory of Kanchi were particular at their climax. Kanchi is really the Varanasi of South India, and the place is always crowded with pilgrims. One of the characteristics that I noticed here is this, that their pilgrims are required to visit the idols in bare bodies. The entire surrounding is pregnant with so much holiness that one feels in his mind a rare sense of delight." So this was the mind of the wandering monk as he visited all the notable shrines and idols in South India. He was as much after the spiritual tradition as he was a keen observant of the aesthetic beauty of each and every place, as it was reflected in various sculptures and architectures. And this is why Swami Abhedananda, after some years at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Science, while delivering a series of lectures on India and her people, could speak so eloquently on the various aspects of Indian life, culture, and civilization. Both Vivekananda and Abhedananda, as the pilgrims of India, not only visited the temples and idols, but also read in the stone carvings and architectural workmanship the true history of ancient India. And this marks out both of them as the greatest wandering monks of modern India. We might as well say that every step of their years-long wandering was shadowed by the vision of past India, and they also looked from past to the present as they crossed from one place to another. And this is why they could speak with authority about the land of their birth when they appeared on the world stage as the exponents of Indian civilization and culture. They embraced the whole of India as they traversed all over the country. Swami Abhedananda arrived at Madras after completing his southern pilgrimage, which ended in the year 1893. The long journey on foot had physically exhausted him, and he was feeling dead tired. As he wrote, "So I thought that it would be better if I now returned to Calcutta." The words of Naren still clearly rang in my ears. "You are a son of Sri Ramakrishna, and the Muth consists of all of us." I now realized the truth of it, and I decided to return to my brother monks and to live with them. The decision came to his mind one day at Abhedananda stood under a wayside tree. It was just at that moment that a Madrasi gentleman came to him and asked him in English as to his destination. I then told him that my destination was Calcutta. The gentleman then looked at my face and asked me, "Do you want to go to Calcutta on board a steamer? Presently, a steamer bound for Calcutta will sail from Madras port. Do you want to avail yourself to this?" "I have no objection," I told him, and he was then about to give me some money out of his pocket as a passage. And when I informed him politely that it was against my monastic principle to accept any gift of money from anyone, but if he can provide me with a fourth-class ticket in the steamer, I would accept that gratefully. The gentleman was pleased at this, and then requested me to follow him to the ticket room. He went inside and presently returned with a fourth-class ticket, which he handed over to me, and then he bowed down to me respectfully. At once again I was overwhelmed with the boundless mercy of the Master. A few quantity of parched rice that I could collect at Madras before I sailed for Calcutta enabled me to sustain myself for the days I was on the steamer. Landing at the Calcutta port, as Abhedananda was proceeding on foot towards Baranagar Muth, he came to know from a person that the Muth had shifted to Alabazar. As he wrote later, the information delighted me very much, for I had promised that I would never return to the Baranagar Muth. Thus his promise was fulfilled, though indirectly, and it did not take him long to realize the hands of the master behind it. Thus, moving on for years across the length and breadth of India, practically covering on foot all the principal sites of pilgrimage in the whole of India, when the wandering monk returned to the Muth, he was then a fully spiritually evolved being who had grown in mental stature, feeling at every moment a strange shining of power within him, just as Swami Vivekananda felt on the eve of his glorious departure to the New World.